So the next topic that we're going to cover is core concepts. So just some kind of a little bit of a deeper dive, not too deep, but a little bit of a deeper dive that will just help us kind of start getting to understand QML and how to develop apps at a little bit deeper level. So what I want to talk about next is object positioning, and I think there's a couple different ways that you can think about positioning when you're talking about apps, specifically when you're talking about GIS related apps or mapping apps, right? So there's positioning like global positioning, but that's not actually what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is positioning as in where do you want to place your elements on the screen? And there are 4 different ways that you can position objects within QML. So the first is to specify the X and Y position of the object within its parent. So manual positioning with X and Y. So in the code snippet that you see to the right, we've got a rectangle within an item. And so that rectangle is 80 pixels by 80 pixels. And we've positioned it at X, we've positioned it at 20 pixels in. So X starts at the left-hand side where X is 0, right? And Y starts at the top of the page where Y is 0. So you can see there that we've kind of created a 20 pixel margin on the left and the top of that rectangle. Now, the problem with manual positioning is that, the size of the devices that your users will be using are all different. So if you wanted to position this rectangle in the center of the screen, the X and Y of the center of one screen or one device is going to be different than the X and Y of a different device. And so X and Y aren't always the best, and they're typically not the best way to position your elements. What's a much better way of doing it is what you've already seen, is using anchors. So we've kind of, you've seen this in some of the code snippets in the slides, and then also we used anchors also in the demo. And so with anchors, we specify the position relative to the top, bottom, left, right, or center of either the parent of the element or of one of its siblings. So in this code snippet, you can see that we have 2 rectangles now. One is green at the top left and one is red at the bottom right, and we're using anchors to position both of those. So the green one, you can see that is anchored to the top of the parent and to the left of the parent. So our parent is the item altogether, which is this whole container of the app. And then we've also given it a margin. So you saw that we used margins within the hands-on exercise. So that just gives it a 10 pixel margin in this case. So it's not right up against the edge of the item. And then same is true for the red rectangle, except we're anchoring it to the right of the parent and the bottom. And so that ensures that no matter what device you're running this app on, the location of these elements are always going to be the same in relation to the other items on the screen. So definitely a much better approach than manual positioning with X and Y. Now, third way is using positioners. A positioner allows you to stack objects one after the other, either horizontally using a row, or vertically using a column. And so in the code snippet that you see on the right, we're using a column, and we have 3 different rectangles this time. And you'll notice we're not using anchors at all. We're not using X and Y properties of those rectangles. We've just simply nested those rectangles within a column. The column fills the entire parent, but you can see that the rectangles begin at the top left. So, and then there is a tiny little white space between each of the rectangles. It's hard to see because it's only 1 pixel, but there's a spacing property in column and row elements. And so in this case, we've given a spacing of 1 pixel. And so you can see that they're stacked one on top of the other, in this case vertically, because we have a column. Now, this is going to look very similar to the next method for positioning, which is a layout. And you'll notice the code is identical to the snippet you saw on the last slide, with the only difference being that instead of just using a column, we're using column layouts. If I go back to the previous slide, it was just a column, but the rest of the code is entirely the same. So with layouts, we've used the column layout, and you can see here what the difference is. Even though we've given it a spacing of 1, with a layout, the items within the layout are distributed evenly. So it's a more fluid way of positioning your items on the screen. So we said that the column layout should fill the anchor, so it makes sure that the items within it are distributed evenly. Okay, so we've also seen a little bit of JavaScript. Well, in the case of our hands-on exercise, really only one line of JavaScript, other than when I was answering the question about the math.min or math.max, that was also JavaScript there. But like we mentioned before, JavaScript in QML is based on the ECMAScript language specification 5. And there are a few places that JavaScript can be written within your app. So the first is through a standalone JavaScript file, and that JavaScript file can be imported into the QML document along with the other import statements. So here you can see we've got a JavaScript file that lives within the project folder. In this case, there's a JavaScript file called myfunctions that lives in the project folder, and we're importing it as myfunctions. And then you can see later on down here on the onClicked signal handler within a button, there's a set color function within that JavaScript file that's being set, that's being called basically. So that's one way of writing JavaScript within your QML documents. Another way is through property binding. And so we talked about this a little bit in the slides earlier, and also in the little demo that I gave. So that's defining a property as a function of another. And we have a sample of property binding in this code snippet where we're checking to see for the text element, we're defining the text which is dependent on the width of the app. So if the app's width is less than or equal to 400, then the text that's written out to the screen will say the width of the app is short. And if it's greater than 400 pixels, then it'll say width of the app is long. So using property binding, we can insert JavaScript code into our QML documents. A third way is through signal handlers, and those, if you're familiar with other languages, those are the same as events. So signal handlers are where we can write JavaScript code when a certain signal is emitted. So in the sample that we have here on the right, the signal that we're using is on the button. So the button has a clicked signal, and so the signal handler syntax is on clicked. And then within the curly brackets, we have our JavaScript code, which in this case is a condition to check the color of the rectangle. And then also you can have custom methods. So JavaScript functions that are defined within QML objects. And so in this case, you see here, again, we talked about this in terms of property binding with, the text being dependent on the width of the app, but also this is a place in the sample where you can see where a JavaScript code is defined right here within a QML object. So you can also create your own properties and your own signals when you're developing your app. So this sample is kind of an enhanced version of the rectangle color change snippet that you've seen not only in Erwin's demo earlier, but in another code snippet earlier in the slides. So in this case, what are we doing here? We have a property that we've defined in our code called count. And every time the button is clicked, we're updating the value of count. So we're just adding 1 every time. And then when you have a property, so automatically when you create a property, all properties have a signal handler for when that property changes. So you can use the syntax on whatever the property name is changed, and that signal emits whenever the property that you created changes. So whenever the button is clicked, count gets incremented by 1, and because count is changing, the signal gets called that the count has changed. And so the text element text gets updated to show the number of times the color has been changed. And then you can also have signals. So in this case, when the text changes, there's a signal called. So there was a signal defined here called text updated, and that signal is called within our count change signal handler. And so when that signal is called, we're updating, or we're writing out to the console, text has been updated. So this is a really simple sample to just show that you can create your own custom properties and signals, and that properties all by default have a signal handler for when that property changes. Okay, so in the next hands-on exercise, we're going to continue building on to the app that we started. And what we're going to do is add on to the menu button. When you click that menu button, we're going to have a couple different options for the user to choose from. And the top one is Esri Apps. We're going to, when the user clicks on that one, we're going to have a new page launch in the app. And we're going to give it a tool button to close. So we want to be able to also close that page.
Sorry, Brooke, if I want to import the demo one to my, how can I do it?
Yeah.
From,
so if you want to open up the demo one from the zip file.
Correct, yes.
Yep, okay. So, so once you have the zip file unzipped, what you can do is from your menu, if you open the Qt Creator. So what I did, I know it opened on my other screen, but what I did was, let me exit out of my PowerPoint. I just typed in Qt and I found my Qt Creator and I clicked on it. So that will launch an empty Qt Creator application, and I'll go to File, Open File or Project. And then from here, you want to navigate to that folder that you unzipped. So I will do that. Oops. And then it was called QML Demo 1. So within that folder, I'm going to choose to open the myapp.qml project. So QML project is the file that you want to open, and that will provide access to all of the QML files within your project.
If we press on the project file, will it open on its own?
Can you ask that again?
If we double click on the project file, will it open on its own?
Oh, no, I don't believe so. I don't know if you can possibly set the default application for that. I have never tried it. Let me see. Yeah, you maybe can, browse to the Qt Creator application so that anytime you open or anytime you double click on the QML project file, it automatically opens the Qt Creator. I'm not sure exactly where it is installed, so I'd have to dig around and find it, but that could potentially work. I don't know, Erwin, have you ever done that?
Yeah, no, normally the way you show it, that's how it would work.
Okay, yeah, so to go to open file and then navigate to the project folder and choose the QML project file.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so I'm back to the hands-on exercise that we were working on before, and I want to add on to this exercise just some items in the drawer so that the user can choose from a couple different items. And then when the user clicks on one of the items, I want to launch a new page. And so the first thing I'm going to do is within my drawer component, so after height, I'm going to just create a column. So remember, column is one of our ways of positioning things. This was the third option we talked about, not a layout, but just a positioner. So we talked about manual XY as one way of positioning things. Anchors is the second way. Positioners, that's what this is. And then the fourth way was layouts. So within this column, I want to actually fill the drawer with the column. So I'm going to say anchors.fill. and fill that column, and have the column fill the drawer. Now we're going to use a new component that we haven't used yet, but is also in that help topic that I showed earlier, and it's called item delegate. An item delegate inherits from an abstract button, so it also has a clicked signal. So we'll be using that.
Excuse me, Brooke. There's
yes.
been a request to increase the font size.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, hang on. It looks like I cannot.
Yeah, that's the biggest. That's fine.
Yeah, this is the biggest that I can make it. So the first item delegate, well, we're going to have two, but so for the first, I'm going to set the width equal to the width of the parent, which is the column, which fills our drawer. I'm going to give it a height of 56 pixels. And an item delegate, again, it inherits from an abstract button, which has a display property. And this particular button has the ability to display both an icon and text. And so the display property allows us to distinguish how we want to display the text and the icon. And in this case, I want to display the text beside the icon. You can have it, on top of, or there's different options. So for this, I'm going to define the display as abstract button dot text beside icon. So here you can see there's also text only or text under icon. Those are different options. So the text that I want to use for this item delegate is Esri apps. That's what my button will say. I'm going to give it a font pixel size of 18. So this has a font property, and the font has a pixel size. And this button is also, again, it's going to have text and an icon. So now I want to define my icon. So I'll define the icon property, and within curly brackets, I'm going to define properties of the icon itself. So I've created the icon property, and then I don't have a colon here. I'm just defined a couple of open and close curly brackets. And within this open and close curly brackets, I'm going to define the icon's source. So I have an image in the images folder that you copied from before. So we'll define the path to the folder, which is images, a / and then the image is apps.png. The icon also has a color property. We want the color of this image to be gray. So I'll just set it equal to gray. I want the width of the image to be 25 pixels. And the height of the image to be 28 pixels. So I'll leave that here for a second for anybody who only has one screen and is going back and forth.
It's interesting, when I press enter all the times before, it returned me to the correct sort of tab spacing, but on these it's taking me all the way back across.
It might be because, yeah, it might be because you're missing a curly bracket.
Okay. Yeah,
it's probably a syntax issue.
I'll check that.
Okay. Just wait another few seconds here. Okay, and the last thing I want to do to this particular item delegate is set the spacing property. So this property just specifies the number of pixels that I want to have between the icon and the text. So I'm just going to define this as 50 pixels. Otherwise, they're right next to each other, and I want there to be a little bit of space between the two. So spacing property is is specified outside of the icon at the same level as the other item delegates properties. And it doesn't matter what order you define the properties of these QML components. They can be defined in any order. Okay, so I've saved my code and I just want to see what it looks like and make sure that it looks the way that I'm expecting it to. So I'm gonna, now that I have my code saved, I'm gonna click the run button and just check out what it looks like. So I'll click the tool button and now you can see here I have a new item delegate. You know, again, this is one of those nice components that has a lot of built-in functionality that's just really nice. It gives your app kind of a finished look that you don't even have to worry about with extra code, right? What I mean by that is I hover over this item delegate and you can see it automatically changes colors. Now I'm on a computer so I can hover. On a mobile device you can't hover, but when you click on it you will see that it gives that nice color change to let the user know what they're clicking. Now currently when you click on it, it doesn't do anything at all. You still have to manually close the menu drawer, so we'll need to add some code to handle those little things there. So that's what we'll do coming up here. I do want to copy this entire item delegate and create another one just to kind of drive home the point of columns and positioners, so that you can see really how those work. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy the code for this item delegate. So if I highlight the curly bracket for the end, I can see, where or actually if I highlight the one from the beginning, I can see where it ends to make sure I'm grabbing the entire item delegate and its curly braces. I'm going to just copy it and then right under the first item delegate, I'm going to paste. So I now have two. And I'm going to make just a couple changes to this particular item delegate. I'm going to give it a different text value and a different image. Otherwise, I'll leave everything the same. So the text value that I'm going to give for this one is just about. So it looks like there's an about page. And I'm going to change the image from apps.png to info.png, which is one of the images in that image folder that you copied earlier. Otherwise, everything's the same here. So I've saved my code, and now when I run it, if I click on the tool button, I will see two different menu options.
Quick question.
Sure.
It looks like About and Esri apps are italicized in your version, and in mine it's not italicized.
Yeah, your version is right. I've had an ongoing font issue with my computer.
Okay.
Yeah, that I've corrected, but every time I correct it eventually goes back and I have to restart my machine in order. I don't know what's going on there, but it's me, not you. Okay, so just a couple other things here. What we want is when we click the Esri Apps page, we want a new page to open. So I'm going to create a new page, and so then we'll just have that page open whenever this item delegate, the first item delegate here, is clicked on. So the easiest way for me to create a page is I'm going to copy the page that we defined earlier. So if I scroll up, you can see I've highlighted the anchors to this first page. I'm going to copy it. So select it all. Copy. And then I'm going to put this just below my drawer. So I'm going to paste the code of my new page just below the drawer that I just finished defining. So still within the app container, but outside of the drawer.
And this page is going to do what so I can comment the code?
So this page is going to just launch a new page that on our next hands-on exercise will show like a bunch of different Esri app pictures and titles. So this is like a page of Esri apps.
Excuse me, bro.
Yes.
Can we, maybe I have multiple pages, okay?
Okay.
So just like that. So if I have a multiple pages, I have a huge code, right? Huge line of codes.
Yeah.
So is there any possibility that we define that page in a different?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'm glad you asked it. And ordinarily we would do it that way. And the easiest way would just be to right click on the component itself, go to refactoring, and then right here it lets you move the component into a separate file. And if I click that, it lets me specify the component name and then yeah, it gives me some options. That asks me if I want to fill the parent, which is the component it's within. And so that would be the best way to do that. And that is the way you would do it for this very simple demo. I wanted to keep things as simple as possible, not have code in different pages or different QML files. So that's why we're doing it this way. But yeah, that's a really great question.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Sure. Okay, so I'm going to make just a couple of tweaks to this page. So first, just so that we can tell it's a different page, I'm going to change the background color of the toolbar from deep orange to deep purple. So I'll make that change. And the other thing I want to do is when this page launches, I don't want to show a menu button. I want to actually show a close button so that the user can close this page and get back to the main page of the app. So I'm going to change the menu.png to close.png. We have an image for that already in our images folder. And when the close button is clicked, I need to change what actually happens, on that in that clicked signal handler. So currently, it's copied from our main page, which opens the drawer. We want to remove that. And what we actually want to do is, in this case, for this very simple example, I'm just going to use the visible property to change the visibility of the page. So, I'm going to set the visibility, so visible. Actually, sorry, what I want to do, let me do this differently. So I want to go ahead and give this page an ID. So I'm going to call it apps page. So I give it an ID. And I also want to set the visible property of this page to false, because when this app first launches, I don't want the user to see this page. I only want them to see this page when they click on the Esri Apps button in the menu bar or the menu drawer. So this page is not visible by default. And also when the user clicks the close button, I want to change the visibility of this page defaults. But first, so that everything makes more sense, let me first update the item delegate that launches this page. So if I go back up to the item delegate within my drawer, the very first one. So remember, I said that the item delegate inherits from the abstract button, which contains the clicked event or clicked signal. So right under spacing, I'm going to define the on-clicked signal handler. Remember, the syntax is going to be on-clicked : and then an open and close bracket. So when the user clicks this button, I want the visibility of this page to be true because I want them to see this page, the apps page. So I'll say apps page dot visible equals true. So it's not visible by default, but when the user clicks on this button, it becomes visible. And now I need to update what happens when they click the close button, and you can probably guess that when they click the close button, I want to change the visibility back to false. So apps page.visible equals false. So I'm just toggling the visible property. When they click on the item delegate, the visible property turns to true. And when they click on the close button of the page, the visible property changes to false. So I've saved my code and I'm going to click the run button. We'll see how this works. Okay, so we have our app. We click on the menu button. We'll click on the Esri apps item delegate. And you can see that the page does change, and it's got the, the close button here. But one thing that I don't like is that what I would expect in this app is that this menu drawer should automatically close when I click the button. So we can add one line of code to do that. So that's going to be, again, on the signal handler for the on-clicked for the item delegate. Not only are we going to make the apps page visible, but we also want to close the menu drawer. So that should now, when we click on the item, it should show the apps page and also close the menu drawer at the same time. And there's one other thing I want to do just so we know what we're looking at. If we go back down to the apps page component that we defined, I also just want to create a label, like a header for that page, so we kind of know what we're looking at, because we're going to update that page in the next hands-on exercise. So just outside of the tool button, within the toolbar, but outside of the tool button, I'm going to create a label. So again, I'm outside of the tool button's curly brackets, but I'm within the toolbar's curly brackets. I've defined a label. And I want the text of the label to say Esri apps. I want it to have a pixel size of 24. I'm going to define the color as white. And finally, I want to center this label within the parent, which is the toolbar.
Does the position of an object in the QML indicate its Z order on screen?
Yes. Yes. So anything that it comes further down in your QML file has a higher Z value, but there's also a Z property. So if you did have something defined above and you wanted it to take like a higher Z value preference, you would just define the Z. Does that make sense? So Z,
yeah, thank you.
Yep, sure. Okay, so I'm going to save that. So all I've done now is to this page, the only change I've made to it is I've just provided basically a header to that lives inside the toolbar that says Esri apps. So I just defined a label. So I'm going to click the play button to run this and check our changes. So now when I click the Esri apps button, the drawer menu closes and this new page opens that has a header title, Esri Apps. And when I click the close button, it takes me back to the main page. So I'm just toggling the visibility of the apps page to show it when the button is clicked and hide it when the close button is clicked. So with just a little bit of code, you can already see we've got, you know, some pretty nice, I mean, there's not a lot here, but there's, you know, some nice functionality. We've got, again, this drop shadow, taking advantage of this material design library. We've got the nice, you know, dimmed background on our drawer, like all of these things, you know, you can imagine with any other language, you know, the amount of coding effort that would be involved. It's all handled for you. And if you didn't want this to dim, that's a property that you can very easily change.
Could you scroll your page to where it closes the first page?
Yeah, where it,
to the code where it closes the first page when you want to see the apps. Like when you click apps, it closes.
So it actually doesn't
the menu
close the
bar.
first page. What it does is the apps page is visible by default. Sorry, is false. The visible property of the apps page is false by default. And when the user clicks on the item delegate for the Esri apps, the visibility changes. So I never hide the main page in this sample. It's always there. It's just that the apps page is on top of it. And when the app launches, the apps page visibility is false. And I toggle the visibility to true when the user clicks on the menu. Does that make sense?
I have a question related to these pages.
Sure.
How do you control the hierarchy of the way these pages are layered?
Yeah. Yeah, so
If it's a simple answer, if it's more complicated.
Well, so if you are ready to like develop an app that has multiple pages, I would say look at Stack View. It's a component that lets you push pages rather than just toggle on the visibility for this simple app. The visibility works fine, but Stack View is what you'd want to use if you are developing an app where you're going to be, you know, having multiple pages, which is the common thing. That's what you know, Erwin and Chris and anybody who would develop like a real app, we would use Stack View. And with that, you can push a page, and that pushes the page on top, and pop a page, and that pops it off. And it doesn't matter, like, you know, where, like, the Z value of the page.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah,
thank you.
Sure. Okay. So any other questions on this demo?